All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Matt Carter. I'm Executive Director for the Dakota County Historical Society. I want to thank you for registering for today's event. If it looks like I am a little distracted, we still have some people coming in and also registering, so we'll make sure we get them all signed up and ready to go. For some housekeeping, if you weren't here earlier and you missed it, this presentation will be recorded, so we will have this available after the fact. One of the questions that did just pop in, so with our microphones being muted, there is a chat feature at the bottom of your screen. The bottom of your Zoom screen, if you click either chat or more, depending if it's hidden, you can type a question in there and we'll be monitoring that for the rest of the afternoon or the evening here for the presentation. If there's an issue that needs to be addressed right away, we'll do that. Otherwise, we'll try and save all of the questions for the end. But I will answer the one question that came in already of, is there a handout? There was a handout. So if you did not receive that, after the presentation is over, within the next day or so, you will be receiving a follow-up email with a survey. We ask that you fill that out, just give us some feedback on what you thought of the event, and we can reattach that handout at that point. So if you missed it on the first one, it'll come in through that. So we'll be able to get your feedback, and you'll also be able to get that handout at the same time. Again, if you do have any questions or any issues throughout the presentation, feel free to use that chat function. I will be monitoring that throughout the evening, so if there is anything that pops up, we'll be able to address it right away. We do want to thank everyone again for being here and joining us. We actually had more than 50 registrations from people literally all across the country, so that's great to see. There's more than a dozen states that are represented. So someone already did it once, but if you're willing and you want to, feel free to go into that chat feature and share where you're joining us from. It's always nice to see where everyone is right now sitting and enjoying the presentation. For those of you that do not know us, again, we are the Dakota County Historical Society. We operate 3 different historic sites within Dakota County, Minnesota. Our headquarters is the Loshie Museum. We were founded in 1939. Our building was built in 1978, and that is our organizational headquarters. We have our archive and research library there, so if you are interested in doing any sort of genealogy research, feel free to go to our website, www.dakotahistory.org, the same website you went to for registering. And we can answer your research questions that way. We are open, so you are able to come in and do in-person research. We also operate the Leduc Historic Estate, which is a Gothic revival mansion that was built in 1866, and that's located down in Hastings, Minnesota. And then we also operate the Sibley Historic Site in Mendota, Minnesota. So as COVID hit, as with most businesses that are out there, we were forced to close our sites, and because we weren't able to bring anyone to our sites, we decided to bring our presentations in the history to you through virtual programs. This presentation is sponsored by the Union Pacific Foundation's COVID Relief Grant. We were able to obtain a grant that allowed us to do these virtual presentations and offer them free of charge to the public. So we appreciate everyone that's joining us today, and especially those that were willing and able to give a donation to help offset the costs of operating 3 historic sites. So with that, I will now introduce our presenters. So we are joined today by Kathy Weber. Kathy is a genealogist that's been conducting genealogy research for more than 40 years. And she started North Star Genealogy to help others with their own research and to teach educational classes and presentations like we're doing today. She is president of the Anoka County Genealogical Society and a member of the Association of Professional Genealogists, in addition to being a genealogy instructor and researcher. So with that, I will turn it over to Kathy, and I will turn my camera off so you can focus all your attention on her.
Great, thank you, Matt. Can everybody hear me okay? I hope. If not, put something in the chat and Matt will let me know. We are going to talk about using maps and land records tonight. It's kind of an exciting thing to figure out where your ancestor lived and then look for the records for them. So these maps can provide you with clues to where they lived and then where to look for those written records about them. Okay? But on the other hand, those other records you find are going to give you clues to go find where they lived and lead you to the maps. So you're going to work with maps hand in hand with other records. Okay, the best maps are the ones that are going to show you the great detail in the area where your family lived. Okay, but you also need to look at where that location is within the county or other jurisdictions and see the names and of the borders around that area. Also, you want to find maps that are dated. Okay, it's very important, and I'll say this a few times tonight, is the date of the map needs to match the date that your ancestors lived there. So we're going to talk about different types of maps. We were familiar with road maps and atlases and different levels of city, county, state, country maps. Plat maps, and we'll talk about those in more detail tonight, and I'll show you how to read a plat map. Census maps, so this year's a 2020 census, there's enumeration districts assigned to all of those census records. So you can match up where they lived with the maps. Topographical maps showing the elevations and rivers. This is important for migration. How did they get from point A to point B and what was in the way? Sanborn fire maps show the structure of the buildings in an area and tell you who owned the building at that time. And it helped the fire department to know how to deal with the buildings. But they're really good records for you as genealogists. If your family owned one of those buildings, you can see what it was made of and how the building is formed. There's also going to look at old maps, and when you're doing genealogy, that's a lot of what we're looking at is the old maps of what it looked like when our ancestors were there. Many times these were hand-drawn and not necessarily to scale, but they will give you an idea of what the area looked like at that time. So for example, this is Plymouth Harbor. This is a very early Plymouth Harbor map. And you can see, you know, it's all written out by hand. You know, the things are sometimes in different directions, but it gives you an idea of what was there at that time. This map is from 1755, showing you North and South Carolina and Georgia. So you need to pay attention to maps and where the borders are at the time of the map also. A gazetteer is a geographic dictionary or an index of place names, okay? They're not maps, but they're very valuable when you come across a name of a place that your ancestor was connected with, but you can't find it on a current map. So you want to go to a gazetteer and look that up and see when it was called that name and what it was changed to later, that maybe you can then find the location at that time. So how do you find the right map? Okay. First, you need to look for clues to the location of where your family lived. And then you need to look for the date on the map. Okay. County and state lines changed as the westward migration grew. The counties were bigger, and then many more people started living there, so they divided them up into smaller areas. So then the names changed. People moved. You need to track that migration path as people moved across the United States. Place names changed. Sometimes you might have something as a township and later becomes a city, but not necessarily the same name. For example, Anoka Township in Anoka County is now the city of Coon Rapids. So you need to know those name changes and the date that it changed, because you don't want to record the name of the place on a current name when they lived there on the previous name. So you need to match that up. This is a census record. This is from 1900, but in the upper right-hand corner, this shows an enumeration district. So that enumeration district will match a map showing that. And I'll show you that in a minute. But on the left side of this, there is a street name and a house number. So the first column is a street name going vertically up the side, and then the second column is a house number. So you have an address if you have somebody living in the 1900 census. And that could be very helpful then to go find that map. This is an enumeration district map. This is Anoka County from 1940, showing you the different enumeration districts that will match that number on the top of the census record. So then I can go to this map and kind of pinpoint the area where my family lived in 1940 census. Other clues you want to look for: locations, old letters. How many addresses are on an old letter or on the envelope of an old letter? Save those envelopes, it's very important. You have a return address and you have an address that was sent to. Those can give you a lot of clues to families, and maybe even families in the old country, where they came from. Look at other documents like birth certificates or death records or obituaries. For example, this obituary from my great-grandfather says that he was born on a farm southeast of Marion. This is in Iowa. Gives a date, and he passed away. He also attended Millwood District School. So if I were to go to a map from that area, I could maybe find a school that he attended or the area where he was born. So there's a lot of clues that you can find. Other records, look for city directories. It gives you an address, also gives you a place of employment. Phone books, the current phone books give you addresses. Tax records, if they owned land, they paid taxes. And those tax records and those land records will show you the legal land description of where they owned property. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes when I show you how to read a plat map. Also, probate. Probate records, if they owned property, those land records are going to be in that probate file, or at least a description of the property and where they lived or where they owned property. So land records themselves, it's a legal property description of land records. It's going to give you the state, the county, a range, township, and section number, which we'll talk about, and maybe a lot number. So if you've ever looked at your tax statements, when you get them, it doesn't always have your address, physical address. It will have a legal property description on it. That's what you want to look at to go find those maps on the plat maps. So the plat map then matches that legal property description. It also tells you who owned the property at the time the map was drawn. Make sure you look at the date to the map. And not all of them are dated on the map. So when you do find one online, make sure that you record the date that it is from that record. It also is going to show you who their neighbors were. And many times those neighbors are going to have information about your family that you won't find anywhere else. They also might be related because they married. Always look on your maps to find what symbols they have used and what they mean. Okay, there's always a key on a map that'll show you what the symbols, and on a plat map, you're going to find symbols for churches, cemeteries, railroads, schools. There might be a little dot for where the house is in the property itself. So those are the things you want to look for, is details. Okay. Land records are one of the most accurate sources for genealogists. And if you have ever bought or sold land, you know the title searches and everything that goes along with it. It's very important to make sure that that is all correct. So that's what makes these so valuable to look for. We're going to talk a little bit about some background of land records. There's federal land patents. Okay? Originally, the government owned all of the property of the United States, or most of it. So this land patent is the transfer from the US government to private ownership. Okay? After that point, then it is sold or transferred from a grantor, which is a seller, to a grantee, which is the buyer. And it's important to learn those terms because that's the way you're going to find the land records filed, is not by buyer and seller, but by grantor and grantee. So the National Archives has these applications for the initial land record sales. And these are really fun to look for if you get a hold of them. So it's when they're transferred from the public lands to private ownership. There's a link on your thing, it'll be also in your handout. Archives.gov is the National Archives, and so you can look up information about these land records. The Bureau of Land Management, or the General Land Office, so it's BLM-GLO. Okay. They have records online to all of these initial federal land transfers to personal property. Okay, it gives you an image to the property that they have. It'll show you plat maps. It'll show you surveys, notes. There's a lot of information on this site. It's the glorecords.blm.gov is the website. The GLO is the General Land Office. The BLM is the Bureau of Land Management. So anytime that someone settled in an area that was newly developed and they got this property from the government, those records are on this site. So if you got somebody that's been in an area since the beginning, you want to look for these because they can be very valuable. These federal land patents, again, it's that initial transfer to individuals. It can verify that transfer. It also associates an individual with a specific location and a time or date. Okay, so putting people in a place at a certain time is important to your timeline of your research. Patents are the first record in the chain of title of a piece of public domain. So if you have that abstract, when you bought property, they used to give you a paper abstract, they don't anymore. But that abstract goes all the way back to this land patent. And then it shows you all of the times that that title changed over the years. If you have one of those, hang on to them because you can't get it back if you lose it. There are different types of land patents. There's different ways that people obtain this first property. One was they could pay cash for it. They just outright would buy it for whatever value that they had on it at the time. Another one is to buy it on credit. Well, now we can buy a mortgage, get a mortgage for 30 years or 15 years or whatever. At that time, it was a 4-year installment plan to buy it on credit. And if they didn't pay all of those payments in that 4-year period, that land would revert back to the federal government. So that was just another early mortgage record that they had to buy it from the government. Homesteading allowed settlers to apply for up to 160 acres of public land, but they had to live on it for 5 years, and they had to prove that they were cultivating the land and that they built something and were taking care of it and making it better. And then they were able to file for ownership of this property. It did not cost them anything for their land, but they did have to pay a filing fee. And I have found a few of these which are very interesting when you read through them. So it may tell you who it was that helped them get there or how they're connected with the neighbors. The neighbors may be witnesses to the fact that they have lived there for 5 years. Also tells you what they did to improve that property. And my husband's ancestors in Faribault County bought or homesteaded the land. It was a log home, 16 by 20, and 9 people lived in it. So it tells you exactly what it is that they did. I can't imagine living in something that small with 9 people. Military warrants. If they served in the military for the United States, instead of paying them cash, which the government didn't have, they paid them in bounty land warrants. So they received a piece of paper that says you are entitled to so many acres of land, and as it went west. So they could either go claim that land and go live on it, they could will it to their children or grandchildren, or they could sell it. But look for these records, because even if they did not move there, their name's going to be in the record as the military person that received the bounty warrant. And then it'll show the transfer of it to whoever did go claim that property. So that was another way that they expanded westward, was to give that to our military servicemen. There was also land assigned to the construction of the railroad. Now, they didn't know exactly where the railroad was going to go at the time, but they just set aside a certain number of acres in the area that they knew would be for the rail lines. And sometimes they had to move that actual physical property description as to where the road actually went through. So they may have reserved, section 1, but the railroad went through in section 4, so they just transferred that property to the different area. And then once they got the rail lines in, they could sell the extra property around it. So we're going to talk a little bit about reading federal land maps. Okay, and federal land maps is what we have in Minnesota, where you have a township, range, and section number. Okay, now I noticed somebody on here from Pennsylvania, you don't have federal land maps, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So on a federal land map, you have sections, range, and township, range, and section. Okay, there is a meridian line that goes north and south. There's a baseline that goes east and west. And the United States is divided up with those lines. So you can see this map on the page, and it just shows you where those lines are. And that the grid starts on those lines. So your township and ranges are going to come from that center point of that grid. Okay. Your townships go north and south. So the lines will go north of that line or south of that line. Ranges will go east and west. Okay. When you look at a plat map, you will see the range numbers or the township numbers. The range numbers are going to go east and west, so it's going to be at the top or the bottom of the map. So you can see across this when it says range 5 west on the right, range 6 west, range 7 west, range 8 west as it's going to the left. That's because we're going west of that meridian line. Okay. Now if we're going by township, numbers are going to go north and south of that baseline. So these are going 84 north, 85 north, 86 north. So you can tell if you're north or south of the line. Really important is to learn to read these plat maps to find the property. So if I look at Lynn County, Iowa, and I'm looking for range 5, township 84, and it comes up with, this is Lynn County, so this is a county map, and at the top right corner it says range 5 west, and if I come down the left side I have township 84 north, and if you see where those cross, it's that green square on the right side that is called Brown Township. Now your legal description on your plat map is going to be range 5 west and township 84 north, but you will find Brown Township in other maps and other records. Okay. So you need to realize that it has a name and it has the numbers. So a township is 36 sections. A section is 1 square mile. So therefore a township is 36 square miles. Now you notice how this is numbered. If you look at the upper right corner is 1, going to the left goes to 6, drops down to 7, goes back to the right, goes to 12, comes down to 13, goes back to the left, and then back and forth. And this is really important to know so that you can visually find the property when you're looking for it. Because if your ancestor owned the south half of section 9 and the north half of section 16, if you just saw those numbers, you would think, oh, they have two different properties. In reality, they're connected. They just cross the section line. So it's important to understand how these are read. So that section, 36 sections in a township, and each section is 1 square mile. Now you see this yellow section in the middle goes 1 through 6 and back and forth. But what if they owned the west half of 6 on the right side and the east half of 1? So you're in two different townships when you're looking at the sections. So again, you have to understand how they're connected together. And this is a 1895 plat map of Marion Township. And it's showing you the names of the owners of the property, okay, in each area. It also tells you how many acres they owned. So if I go to section 1, which is right here, you can see that there's a railroad track going through it, and you can see the names of the property owners. There's an Oxley family, there's a Palmer family, there's another Palmer, there's some Sechrist families. Those are all my ancestors, okay? That's all connected in that family. So it's really neat to be able to go find that property itself and see where it was that they lived 100 years ago or 120 years ago. So when you're reading a legal land description, it's going to be written out in words. So when you come across something in a probate file or the land record, it's going to say something like the south half of the southeast quarter of section 1, range 6, township 83. Now the first time you look at that, you're going, where is that? It's kind of Greek. So the thing to remember is you need to write it out so it's easier to read. So sometimes you will see it written S half, SE, which is southeast quarter, section 1, range 6, township 83. It's a little bit easier to read than the text. Now, how do you find this property on a map? Well, you need to read it backwards. So we need to start with the township and range numbers. So if we look for the township and range, we find that that is Marion Township in Iowa, Lynn County, Iowa. And then you will see within that township are sections. And those sections, remember, start in the upper right corner with 1 and go to the left, down, right, down, left. Okay. So find the section. So on the right side, we have the township 83, range 6, section 1. Once we get to section 1, you need to look at the southeast quarter. So a section is divided into quarters, north, south, east, and west. So the southeast quarter would then be that bottom right quarter of that section, okay? And then it's the south half of that. So that's the property that they owned, was the south half of the southeast quarter of section 1, range 6, township 83. Okay. So if you look at this section 1 map here, you can see the south half of that under the railroad tracks is where that property was. But look at this one. It's not Palmer's anymore. It's Bliss, because this is a 1930 map. They didn't live there in 1930. Now Oxley still lived there north of them, but the Palmers did not. So that's why it's very, very important that you match the date of your map with the time and period that your family was there. So plat maps, then, as a review, that's baseline and meridians. There's tracts, there's sections, and it's used in the federal lands, okay? These are the 30 western states started between 1785 and 1797. So those states are these 30. And you can see that Minnesota is one of them. I'm not sure where everybody else is from. There might be from Wisconsin is also a federal public land state. So if you have ancestors in any of these states, you want to go to the BLM website and look to see if maybe they were the first ones to either buy it or homestead it or get it as a military bounty land. And the records, when you find them, are going to show you that, how they obtained that property. Now, if you live in Pennsylvania or any of these other states, you are going to find a different way of marking property, and that's called meets and bounds, okay? So if you're in any of these states, which many of you probably are if you go back far enough, you're going to be dealing with a different way of finding property. Meets and bounds is measurements and boundaries, okay? It is measured by direction, degrees, and distance. So you would start at a starting point, and it says to go south 67 degrees west for 593 feet. So you need a compass, you need a measuring tool to measure how far you're going and what direction you're going. And then it's going to come to a point, and then it's going to turn and go a different direction. Okay. These are much more difficult to figure out because a lot of times that point is a tree or a rock or the neighbor's fence post. And many times when you read through these, it'll reference who the homeowners next to that line is. So it makes it a lot more difficult to find those properties when you're getting into these states. But there is a site, Deed Mapper software, and there's other softwares. This is one that I found. You can plat those old land patents and put them on a modern map using software that's available online. And I know there's other free software out there too. I believe this one, last I checked, was like $99. Somebody's probably put something in the chat. There may be other sites. So look for that, and then you can be able to map out when you find those original land records for your family at that time. So how do you get copies of land records? Well, go to your county courthouse, okay? Whoever is taking care of property records, usually the property records department. It may call it different in different places. I know that in Anoka County it's the property records, but sometimes they use different names. There may be published books of some of these county land records that someone has put together from the early records. A state archives might have some of the records. The Bureau of Land Management and the GLO, so that BLM website that we talked about, has those land records from the beginning when it was first transferred from the government. After that, it's not going to be in the BLM website. It's going to be in the county site of the county that the property is in. And on that note, let me remind you that even though a county split and part of it became another county, the land records did not move. Okay? The land records at the time when they bought it were going to be in the original county. So you may be looking in 2 or 3 different counties for a tracking of land records as the county lines change. So you paid attention to those dates. There are microfilm copies of the deeds. LDS Libraries has some of those land records. And the National Archive has those land patent applications. So if your family homesteaded the property, and you can find that in the BLM website, and it'll tell you on that site that it was homesteaded, you want to get a hold of that homestead application from the National Archives because it is invaluable to you with the amount of information that is in it. Remember to look at the indexes for property, okay? They come in as big books. Look at the grantor index, but also look at the grantee index. So when did your family buy or sell this property? That will give you then a volume and a page number to look for in the tract book. And those tract books look like this, and they're huge. They're like 4 inches thick. They're probably 18 by 18. inches square. And inside of them, I will list each tract by the section and range or section number and show you who bought and sold that property. So for example, here this is 82 West Range 6. There's a description with northwest, southeast, southwest, and there's remarks on this page. Pay attention to those remarks because that may give you even a smaller area of property within that section or range. But these are really good resources for you to find your family's land records. I happen to live in Oak Grove, and I thought, well, who owned the land where I live in 1914? Because Anoka County has 1914 plat maps. So pull those out, find where your land is. If you're not sure where it is on the map because it doesn't have the street names anymore, go back to your land description and find the section, range, and township number so you can match it up from these plat maps. So it's kind of interesting just to see that history of the property where you own. Ancestry.com has some map resources for you. This is one of them that I found. It's an index county land ownership maps. And it's from 1860 to 1918. So if you go to their website and you look for this, you can search for property by these ownership maps, and they're plat maps that they have digitized and indexed. Okay, but remember I told you don't just know by the township name like Brown Township, you need to have the numbers. The township, range, and section numbers is the way that this record set has got them organized, so you need to know both. So if I click on any one of these and come up, I can come up with, this is happens to be Minnesota, not Missouri, but it is a Farmers Directory Atlas of Faribault County. These plat maps usually were put together as a book, and the book is going to show you an index of who lived on the properties and then reference it to where on the property they lived. So this is showing you the township and maps. This Farmers Directory, in this case, is super. If you've got people in this area, you want to go find these because look at the abbreviation list across the top. You have SEC means section, so that tells you what section. Dunbar Township is the area that they live. Now this is going to give you the section. It's going to give you how many acres they owned. It's going to give you their wife's name, their children's names, and in parentheses, how many years they lived in the county. How valuable is that to your research when you can find something like that? That's basically a census right there of this year's township map, plat map, okay? And tells you how long they've been there. There are a lot of there's a lot of resources available to you. I mean, this is only a 1-hour class. But take some time to learn to use some of these records. The BLM website has some resources on there to help you learn how to use their site. There's some books that I have, Land and Property Research in the United States by E. Wade Hone. Very good, shows you some of the history of the properties and lands of each state and how it changed and how the land office changed and how the county lines changed. There's the handbook for genealogists, and I've used this one so much I've broken some of the pages out of the bindings. But it shows you all the counties within the state, and then there's a listing in there of when each county was formed and who the parent county was. There's a courthouse research for family historians. So we think of courthouse records, you know, birth, marriage, death records, but that's also where your land records are. So you want to look for those kind of resources and learn as much as you can about the record set that you're using in your genealogy research. The more you know, the easier it is to find stuff. Think about finding landmarks. If your family lived in this area, they went to different places. So where are those places? One, where's the library or archives that you can go to when you go to do some research in that spot? Where's the cemetery? Look on the maps for the cemetery. cemeteries that are near where they lived, and cemeteries where you know them to be buried. What church did they attend and where was that located? What businesses were around there? Maybe they owned one of those businesses. And then there's those homesteads. Where did your family live? And find that on the map and see what's around them. Because the things that are close around them are the things that they went to and participated with. This, for example, this is a Raleigh, North Carolina map just showing the downtown area where the archives is, where the state capitol is, where the visitor center. And if you were to go there to do some research, you want to know where the archives is and then what's around it if there's other things that you want to see. So that's real important to study the area that you're going to go visit, because you really do want to go visit the places where your family lived, because it just being there is so helpful to understand where they're from. Using technology to find these, there's so much available online. There's current maps online, so Google Maps and MapQuest that you can use to find places now. Sometimes you'll find that something's so new it's not even on that map yet. But use that technology to get from place to place, especially if you're traveling to do some research. There are computer mapping programs that can map out locations. There's Google Earth is a great program to use to map out the migration path of your ancestors. Where are they born? Where did they move to? Where did they end up? Where were they buried? Just map all those out, and you can incorporate pictures and stories right into Google Earth and really make your history come alive. It's kind of fun to do that and take it to a family reunion because it's interactive. Using your GPS to mark where things are, using your cell phones to map things out. And it knows where you are pretty much all the time. This is a Google map of, remember I showed you that property in Iowa, in Marion Township. This is, highlighted area is that property. And I've been there and found the property where my grandfather was born. Watch for those state line and county border changes. Okay. They may have lived on the same property for 200 years, but been in 3 different counties, only because the border changed. But the records are going to stay in the county that it was at the time the record was created. So whatever that first county was, there's going to have the first records. By the 200 years later, the records are going, the current records are going to be in a different county. So you need to check all those county records. Overlay an old map with a new map. There's a site called Dave Rumsey Map Collection, and he has thousands of maps on there. So you can get these old maps and you can overlay them over a new map on Google Maps and convert them to the same scale and line them up so you can see what was there then and what's there now. It's really a fun thing to do with David Rumsey's map collection, and just go into there and try it. It can really open your eyes to see what's there now. I mean, maybe when they were there, it was a farm and a house, and now it's a parking lot or a high rise or whatever. So just compare that. Take time to learn to use maps in your research. Learn who the neighbors were, because they may be related. They may have records about your family that you don't know about. Maybe the neighbor wrote a diary and it referenced your family. Maybe they were witnesses to each other in court cases. They did things together. It's that fan club, the friends, associates, and neighbors. So pay attention to the neighbors' names when you're looking at these plat maps. Find and go visit that old homestead where your family lived. I have stood on property in Virginia that my ancestors settled in 1750. And it is so cool to stand there and realize that you are a descendant of people who lived there 250 years ago. This is where that property is in Iowa, where the railroad tracks went through. Now it's just a path there. But it was just kind of fun to go see that property there. Other types of things you want to look for, migration patterns. And these maps can really help you to figure out why people migrated the what directions that they did, okay? Sometimes they had to cross a river. Well, where's the best place to cross the river? There were no bridges, okay? Going over mountains, you know, many times they went around the mountains. If you look at the migration paths around the Allegheny Mountains, they go down to Tennessee and go through the Cumberland Gap. So you have to kind of look at that and see what was the easiest way. Some of them migrated by the river, just, you know, taking the river as their route to the next place. So understanding the topographical maps will help you understand the migration patterns of your ancestors. If you're using Family Tree Maker, there is a map option in that program. If you go under the places, if you click on places and you're online, it will show you a map of the place that you are selected on the left side. But it's also going to show you on the right the people in your tree that are associated with that place. But you can take that differently if you go and sort by person under places. It'll show you that person, and then you can track where they were born, where they moved to, and just track their migration just by clicking on the right side over here, the locations where they lived creates a migration map in the center of your screen. So there's a lot of good tools out there for mapping your family's migration. Other websites, the Newberry Library has a great website of historical county maps and boundaries. David Rumsey Map Collection, that's the one I talked about, davidrumsey.com. Excellent site for maps. Just Google the word maps and the location that you are searching and see what comes up. Because many of your county websites, County Historical Society websites, may have put some of these maps online. If not online, they probably have them on site. And if you can get into their site to do some research, you may find these maps right there. Cindy'sList.com, she's the record, she's gone out and done links to genealogy related websites all over the world and all different kinds of websites. But if you go onto her site and just click on maps, you're going to find a whole bunch of links just to map sites. The Minnesota Historical Society has maps online. You can go to their website, and their website is up through this COVID stuff, so you don't have to go there. MNGEO is another one. LOC.gov is the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. has maps, and they are digitizing maps and putting them on their website. So it's another place. These are just a few of the thousands of sites available to look for maps. Okay. There's other types of maps available. You can find maps showing U.S., state, territory, county, and city boundaries. You can find maps just showing migration and transportation routes. There's maps with various churches throughout the United States. There's Indian reservation locations on maps. Ethnic populations, battle sites. So if you're studying someone from the Revolutionary War or the Civil War, you can actually find a map of the battle sites where they fought, which can be really interesting when you read through the unit history and find out where they started and where they went from battle to battle and how far they walked going from battle to battle. Railroad maps, look at that. It looks like the World Wide Web. There's so many railroads. But if you got somebody that worked for the railroad, that can kind of give you some ideas of where they might have lived along the railroad as they were working. Rivers and waterways, census maps. We talked a little bit about that with the enumeration districts. Where did they live? And that's tied to the actual census itself. And just a reminder to include these map images in your family tree when you share it with your relatives. And if you're going to a reunion, think about going into Google Earth and creating a migration timeline map in Google Earth, and then take a laptop and play that. And if you can find pictures of the houses that they lived, you can incorporate that in there, or different stories or different things in history that were going on during the time your family migrated. Can really make history come alive for your family, because some of them just don't think what we do is exciting, but we can make it exciting. So 100 years from now, anyone know where you lived? I am going to turn off my sharing and go to open, and then if Matt has any questions, I will take those now.
All right. Well, thank you, Kathy. A couple of people made some general comments.
Okay.
But the one question that did come through was, what if the family rented or leased the land that they lived on?
If they rented or leased, they will not show up their name on the plat map. If you can find any records of who they rented from, you might be able to find that property. But if it was in a city directory, their still name will be in there with the address, and it'll say rent instead of own. So it just depends on where the property is. But the plat map is the owner of the property.
All right. So that was the only real question that has come in so far. Does anyone else have any other questions that they'd like to throw out there for the group?
You can unmute yourself and ask them if you want.
All right. Oh, I can't because I'm going to type because I have a problem with my speaker.
Oh, okay, Vicki.
I have a question. Sanborn maps, how small how small a town would they have covered?
It varies. I think
surrounding
it's kind
countryside.
of, yeah, I don't know, you know, who or when they decided what ones to make. I think you just have to look in that area where you are and just search for Sanborn maps for that location, see what's there. The Library of Congress has a lot of Sanborn maps.
Thank you.
All right. So Vicky's question did come in. It was, what was that Minnesota Geo website, MNGEO website for?
It just shows you different places in Minnesota. I don't remember the specifics right now, but I think if you just click on it or go to it, it'll show you different map things in Minnesota, specific to Minnesota.
And then another question came in. This one was from Jean. If Mendota is in Dakota County, who would have city directories for 1920? So I'll jump in real quick. So on our website, dakotahistory.org, we do have a list of some of the resources we have available. We do have some maps on our website that you can look at, Dakota County maps. The best chance to see if we do have a city directory for the year you're looking for is to contact the Lashy Museum. And I can put our website link in there. It's, again, the same one you registered on. And you'll talk to Rebecca Snyder, and she could tell you, right off the top of her head, whether or not we have one of those. If we don't have the year, the other suggestion would be the Minnesota Historical Society. They might have those as well. But I'll stop my answer to that question and see if Kathy had anything additional she wanted to add.
I think you covered, check with the County Historical Society or County Genealogical Society and see what they have, or the county libraries that might have a genealogy section. The other is, like you said, Minnesota Historical Society has a lot of city directories.
Sorry about that. Our dog thought he was trying to protect us from a squirrel outside. So.
They do that.
Any other questions that anyone else has? As Kathy mentioned, if you want to, you can unmute yourself or you can throw it down here in that chat box. All right, well, seeing no other questions, Oh, there was a question that did just come in. The question was, what is the Family Tree Maker?
Family Tree Maker is a program that you can use, a database program for genealogy records. So you can download it, put it right on your computer, and build your family tree right in Family Tree Maker program. It does work with ancestry.com, so you can sync those two together and have it in both places. But having Family Tree Maker or Roots Magic or Legacy or different companies that make genealogy software on your computer makes it yours, and you don't have to worry about being able to get online to access your family tree.
All right, so someone did ask about our website again. So I did add it to the chat box there. It's dakotahistory.org. So you can go to our website that way. And again, I did type that link in there. So if you want to copy and paste that, I can leave that up there for a little bit. So with that, I want to thank Kathy for the great information and the ability to share her knowledge with us and everyone else that's joining. Hopefully you're all joining me with a virtual round of applause for her, so thank you for that. I also want to thank everyone again for attending the presentation this evening. In the next couple of days, we will be sending out another email, which again, it'll have that attachment of the handout to it. So if you didn't get that the first time, it'll be included in that. And it'll also have a link to the SurveyMonkey website. It's about 10 questions. It'll literally take you, 2 to 3 minutes is the average it's taking people. So definitely under 5 minutes to complete. Let us know how we did. If there's any information in there you want to share of topics you're interested in, feel free to do that. That's where we have actually received a number of recommendations and gone through and booked them for future presentations. So with that, unless there is any sort of last minute or last second questions, we will go ahead and end the meeting. And again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Matt, for letting me do this.
Thank you.
All righty. Have a good night.
You too.